Powerful music. Liu Yang, who honestly without her, this story probably would have never been told. To call her an advocate would be an understatement. She is what I call an immovable, relentless force. So thank you, Liz. And of course, Danny Chen, who is Danny's cousin. But you know, more than being Danny's cousin, Danny was his best friend. They grew up together, and more recently, in the past several years, he followed somewhat in Danny's footsteps and kind of just sort of carried on the family legacy and became a firefighter in the FDNY. So, just off a 24-hour shift. So, service runs in the blood, to say the least. But let me get right to it. It's late, and we only have so many minutes before we want questions. I'm sure there's many of them. I have so many questions. David, I want to start with you. The title, it was sort of both the most obvious and also the least obvious title at the same time. But this title was very important to you. Can you talk to us about why you chose this title?
Yeah, it seemed to me, yes, it's simple, it's easy to remember, which is always good. But also, you know, Danny, as you saw in the opera, aspired and dreamed of being an American soldier. He, in the eyes of many, was not allowed to be an American soldier, but in many ways, he represents the ideal of what an American soldier should be. So that just felt like a good title.
I loved it. Huang, how did you translate this story into that music that just wrapped around this audience here tonight?
And to me, this story could make a great opera to me because it has so much emotion. And with opera, of course, a lot of time we dealt with personal relationship, dealt with love, dealt with death, and in this story, the love between mother and son. That is something at the end, although the unjust arrived at the court martial, but it was that love of mother and son trumps everything at the end. So I want the audience to live with that love, and so that's why.
And a week or so ago, we were talking, you mentioned how you felt that this was not just Danny's story, but so many of our stories. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and I remember reading about the news after Danny passed, and then we decided to make that into an opera. One thing I told myself is this is not one isolated incident. It did not just suddenly happen to Danny, but it has been a continuation of discrimination towards Asian American, even before the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1880s. So I just feel this is it's such a horrible story, tragedy, but it's a drop in the water. So if we could catch that drop and make that drop count, and that will be very, very meaningful.
Liz, I know you share in that sentiment. Outside of this story not being told, this opera wouldn't have been told without you pushing for this. How important was this for you to come to Manhattan?
Danny's senseless death broke our hearts, but ignited a grassroots campaign for justice. OCA New York led this campaign with many OCA chapters around the country, including OCA New Jersey, who joined the fight. But I must recognize tonight two people in this audience. One is Jackie Wong. Jackie was a reporter with Singdao Chinese newspaper. He broke Danny's story. Jackie, stand up. now a retired executive director of Chinatown Head Start, where Danny went when he was 3 years old. They taught him how to tie his shoe. The fiercest and most consistent ally were monolingual, low-income mothers whose children were attending Chinatown Head Start when Danny died. So I want to give a big shout out to you. Siblings, stand up. It was 3 years of unrelenting volunteer advocacy, collecting thousands of signatures on petitions for justice for Private Danny Chen, unending marches, protests, rallies, press conferences, and meetings with elected officials and Army leaders at the Pentagon and elsewhere, and mobilizing people to pack the courtroom at not just one, not just two, but 6 court-martials in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Danny's story cannot end with the paltry sentences that their superiors who did this to Danny got. That's why we are so grateful to an American soldier, because an American soldier validates our struggle here in this community for justice and keeps Danny's story alive. The receptiveness of David Henry Hwang to write the libretto, and Huang Ruo to compose the music, and PAC, Perlman Theater of Performing Arts, to choose to debut this story as one of the first shows at this new and beautiful theater, affirms that a Chinatown son's life is valued. In the last week alone, over 2,500 people have heard Danny's story. In nearly 13 years since he's died, this is the largest audience I have been able to share Danny's story with. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
This has been seen now in St. Louis, Washington, New York. Where do we go from here?
We cannot be limited by the political, military, and legal institutions that maintain the status quo. Our greatest sword is being able to educate people about Danny's story in as many creative ways as possible. The American soldier demonstrates that that was a successful way. Mancy Kong is finishing a documentary. She's almost done with filming. And she's captured 95% of the advocacy in this case, and will soon be released. Myself, I teach about Danny's story in my pre-law courses at Columbia and NYU, and I'm trying to write a book. The street sign, Private Danny Chen Way, that so many in this theater fought to become a reality, is a permanent infrastructure where we hold the yearly commemorations of Danny's death. This October 3rd will be the 13th year of his death, and we invite you to come. This theater is full of diverse talent. I implore each one of you to use your talents to tell Danny's story. We all know somebody who we can share it with. And why is that important? Because hazing and racial maltreatment is still occurring in the military. And our sons and daughters, nieces and nephews need to know his story. This is not about whether you're pro or anti-military. It's about making an informed choice, whether or not you will serve this country if our country is not enforcing dignity and respect for all people who choose to protect you and me. I urge you to keep his story alive.
And now you all know why I don't mess with Liz. Benny, obvious question for you, man. You've seen this a few times now. What goes through your head as you watch this?
It's always bizarre. So this is the fourth iteration of the opera, and every time it's always a bizarre experience, just because this all happened in real life, something that we experienced. Well, me and my family and people from the community, and his friends and his family have all experienced, and to a lot of you it might be something that's just presented to you on stage, but for a lot of us it's almost like a flashback. So yeah, it's bizarre.
And every time I speak to you about this, you always mention that to you, Danny is still 19, even though he's older than you. What is that like, seeing his story play out like this, and he's still 19? What do you think he would have thought about this?
One thing that I feel like the opera today really showcases how Danny would have reacted, how Danny would have been if he were here alive today. The ghost of Danny portrayed on stage. I really appreciate that. But yeah, that's something I always say. It's so surreal seeing that throughout my whole life, Danny has always been a year and a half older than me. Up until he was 19, I was 17. And every year I just gain age. But Danny will always remain 19 years old. So many things happening in our lives throughout the world. The pandemic happened. New episodes of South Park came out, yet things that Danny will never get to experience. That's something that always hits me.
What about your family? You mentioned Danny's mother saw this Tuesday. What goes through your head as she watches this?
I feel like we all have a similar experience. It's always hard for Danny's parents who don't speak English too well. English is not their native language, which is something that's great with the opera is having subtitles, and even then you wouldn't even need it because it's an art form that transcends language, and it's something that she appreciates as well.
David, during the intermission I heard a lot of chatter about how accurate this was, and I thought the same thing. How did you source some of this?
The original version that we did was only an hour long. Huang Ruo had a commission from the Washington National Opera in DC. And so at that point we thought of it more as sort of a docu-opera, and we're looking at, or I guess when I wrote the libretto, I was looking at some sort of transcripts, and there were daily newspaper reports during the court-martial trials. Then there were also longer articles in places like New York Magazine. So that was mostly the source of well, we were the original 1-hour version, and then we expanded it into a full length for Opera Theater St. Louis. And I was also able to have, for this production as well, sort of wonderful military advisors. And that was, you know, we wanted to create something that would feel true to what happened and also feel credible, particularly to people who had served.
And one more follow-up to you. I noticed off the top of this, I heard the words invisible, and he felt unheard. It's a common theme, if the folks in here may have been watching in 21, my Asian hate coverage that I used often. How important was it that you hit that off the top? I mean, it felt like a common theme that so many in this community face and feel.
Yeah, as you say, and I do feel that it is an experience that a lot of Asian Americans have, and it's pretty, we're pretty familiar with being invisible at times, and sometimes that can be useful. You can slip out of places. But since the conceit was that we would start at the trial, and Danny would be there as a ghost, essentially, that kind of connects well, both story-wise and thematically, with him saying that he's invisible early on.
Liz, I know you were there step by step through all of this. When Governor Patterson and you brought him into this, I know you were there for some of the trials. You mentioned to me in the intermission that his diary was part of this. Can you talk to us about that?
Danny kept a diary when he was in boot camp, and it really gave us insight into his resilience. He was so proud of himself that soldier after soldier quit boot camp, but he still hung in there, and he earned respect because he did that. And you also saw how he grew up in boot camp. He wrote amazing letters home and told his cousins, hey you guys, Chinese New Year, do what you can to get together. Make the effort, because you're not going to have that for long. Such words of love for his parents to make sure that they see a doctor, get their eyes checked. And bewilderment. The teasing in boot camp was not at all like what he endured in Afghanistan. You saw in less than 2 hours a snippet, 1/100th of what Danny endured. And I think his diary was just a testament to resilience. And that was really, really key. Because as you saw in the opera and in real life and in the court martials, they tried to make him out like he was weak. And that diary was so essential to show he was unbreakable in boot camp. And he endured 6 months of boot camp, but something had to have happened so bad in 6 weeks in Afghanistan that he would have died a senseless death.
Huang, I know it was important to you and all of you that the family's blessing was important. How did you take that and translate that artistically?
I remember before we start working on the opera, and I went to Chinatown, I think it's Mocha, and there was an event there, and I got to meet Mother Chen. Liz was there to introduce, and I just remember she could not finish one complete sentence without crying. And that crying is still today I could remember. And it speaks volumes to me. I personally have a mother I deeply love and who cried for me in the past. And I could sense that unbreakable bond without words, but it's so strong. So then after that visit, I came back to David and I said, David, you know what? We should tell the story through the court martial and make it as real as possible, but also let's also bring in Mother Chen as a character, because I feel this story is not Danny's story alone. It needs to have Mother Chen as well. So that becomes the backbone of our opera.
Interesting. One more question for Penny. It's an easy one, and then I'll open this up to questions. There's so many of you stayed late. I have an easy one for you. Skills in walkers. Is that accurate?
It's fairly accurate.
Okay, it was.
Accurate. And I love those little tidbits that were thrown in there. It really personalizes Danny as, you know, just a regular person, a regular kid who enjoys little things like skills and offers.
There you go. It was one wonderful time. There's a lot of you in the audience, and again, thank you for staying late. We have some time for questions from the audience if you want any questions. There's a microphone floating around. There's one over there.
Hello, thank you so much. This was a great opera and great panel. Thank you. One question, as I was watching it, I could just tell that there were probably so many additional stories behind what I was actually seeing, and how things could probably be fleshed out more. But there was a lot more behind it. And so, probably different people would have different answers to this, but the question is, what was either left on the editing floor that was taken out that you wish left in, or what is the story, if you were, in terms of a family member, what is something that, that part of the story that you wish would have made it into this, or could have been told through it, or also, to say it a different way, having seen it now and what people are getting from it, is there anything that you wish would have, now, have been put in afterwards?
Good question. You had 10 hours to do this. Would you have included? Because I know you have a lot to include. So.
I mean, we did kind of have that experience because, as I said, we initially did it as an hour, and then we had the opportunity to expand it, and we wanted to create more kind of personal relationships, more depth to the characters. One particular part that we added was the aria that Danny sings quite shortly before his death, the Amma, forgive me. And that was, Huang Ruo was saying, we need to, well, here, why don't you say what you said?
Well, thank you for your question. And, actually, during our world premiere at DC, we could not fit in all the stories we had. So we took out the letter scene. So the letter scene, actually, David planted there. This is it's so unique. It's so, in a way, it's humorous to really give us a little, lighter part of how I think in that scene was banned, right? Was you translating, but you censor out the curse words, so that Mother Chen could not hear them. So in a way, it's so true, but it speaks volumes of different generations as well. We could not put that in our 1 hour docu-opera. So when we had a chance to do a full length for Opera Theatre of St. Louis, we put that in, but also the way we were thinking is the latter scene should also reflect on Danny's mind, Danny's suffering. At the book camp, he was happy, as what Liz was saying, he really feel there's a team spirit is part of it, and you could see the letters more playful in it. And then when he went to Afghanistan and the letter scene become darker, And the last letter scene was his bidding goodbye to Mother Chen. And of course, that aria was not in our original DC version. After seeing that, I came back to talk with David. I said, well, one thing I never know is what Danny might be thinking that night. And he must have so much going on in his mind. Who was he thinking about? Must be Mother Chen. But what did he want to tell her? So that starts with our aria, and also I think he did tell my parents I'm sorry. So I'm sorry was a phrase from his writing, and also veggie plug. So we put those important words in, and with David's expansion, and we make that into the last letter, the farewell letter.
Good question. There's a couple over here. Microphone's floating around. You can take mine if you want. I need it back though.
Mike.
Thank you for putting on such a powerful opera, and thank you for staying back to talk to us. This is an easy one, hopefully. Dumplings was referenced a lot, so what was Danny's favorite dumplings?
That's for you. I think Danny really enjoyed all kinds of different types of Chinese cuisine. Probably his favorite would be his home cooked meal with his mom. His mom's a really great cook. The funny thing is, Danny's dad is actually like a career, a chef. I would say Danny's mom would probably be that's a pretty good cook. Looking back, because I would sleep over at Danny's place during like summer vacations, winter vacations. And I would come home. I remember one time I told my mom, I was like, why does Danny's mom's cooking better than hers? Thinking back, I should not have said that.
There's a question over here in the middle, if we can get a microphone, and then it's in the back. We'll get you one. You've been trying for a while.
Suspense.
Right over here. I can't reach you from here, so.
There was an online article about this story that it was contemplated that this originally might not be in form of opera, but perhaps a play. And in the article it said that, because opera was chosen because maybe it would be distinctive, make it a little bit more distinctive. And I think earlier in the talk you had said in the form of opera, a lot of emotions can be conveyed compared to maybe a musical or a play. Could you share why ultimately you landed on this and why, I'm sure you're satisfied with it being an opera and the advantages of it being in a form of opera versus a play or a musical or other things?
And can you make it into 3 acts?
Yes, if someone wants to do it in 3 acts, we will find other interesting stories to tell. But I think that just where I am as a playwright, I'm interested in stories that have more kind of moral and political ambiguity, and this felt like this was pretty straightforward. And so opera feels to me to be, as Huang Ruo was saying a moment ago, just about like big emotions, about love and death and passion and hate, and therefore it seemed to me to be the right medium for it, and I guess you agree.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for involving me in this. Well, obviously I'm an opera composer. So that's my day and night job. But I think one thing I thought back, it is hard to, because this just happened at that time, maybe 1 year, a little more than a year. It was so fresh in everyone's memory. If we do a play, I guess partially it was like, we don't want someone come in and say, that actor doesn't look like Danny, or that scene should not be done that way or the other way. So I think with a theater piece, we aim for realism. We aim for make it look as real as possible. And I can't wait to see the documentary film come out, because that also is the strength of film and documentary film. It really documents the real people, real events. But for a theater piece, maybe in 10 or 20 years, there should be a theater piece about what happened to Danny. I would love to see that, and I would write music for that also. Maybe we'll have a second collaboration. So, but with opera, just so fresh, what happened, everyone's memory is so fresh, and I think opera, not all, the great thing about opera is it brings emotion, brings characters closer and deeper, but also it have that 1 degree of walking one step backwards to see and hear it clear. So magically, I think this art form not only transcend the story, but also it deepens the story. Make us feel those characters on stage. They are real. I cry every time I saw them, which is crazy because I wrote all that. I still cry. So I guess that's my best answer to you.
So you like it. There's been some questions, hands up in the, yeah, there we go.
Beautiful, wonderfully done. If there's something going on these days that would be similar in story, where someone's getting abused, suffering, going through a similar type of situation, what would be a more appropriate reaction from the community in terms of how could we garner support, unity to sort of help a person that might be going through something like that? And I ask just because I think these things happen pretty regularly, but to see it on stage, put out this way within our community is wonderful, because it gives us hope and the possibility that there's more of a solution, resolution, or mechanism to deal with it. But I don't think those mechanisms are in place. So I'd like to just sort of ask what your thoughts would be on that.
That's all you, Liz.
It's the community that got this story to where it is today. Mrs. Chen, as you can well imagine, was beyond distraught when she learned of what happened to Danny. And she has said over and over again that it's the community who got her through it. And we are grateful. In Manhattan, Chinatown, we have a community. And that community doesn't just extend to the people who live there, but people who work there, the people who know people there, the people who send their children to childcare there, the people who shop in Chinatown and give and patronize the small businesses. And so that is critical, that there be a community. 6 months before Danny died, Chay Yew also died a senseless death as a result of hazing. And he was Congresswoman Chu's nephew. But the difference was that Danny, had the community behind them. And got a little bit further than they were able to get in Harry's case. But I can't begin to tell you how many mothers approached me and said, wow, Danny's family is really lucky that they have the community behind them. We've been trying for years to find out what happened to our son, and we fall on deaf ears. Nobody will tell us. And so you can never underestimate the power of community. As far as hurting, and it brings out that issue of mental health, how important it is when we have someone in a different environment to check up on them, to find out how they're doing. in the Army, there is the Service Women Action Network that is a support group for women in the military. And in DC, they were our closest ally. Grassroots, Chinatown Head Start. DC, Service Women Action Network held our hand as they walked us through the process of how to get attention by elected leaders, military leaders, to Danny's case. There isn't something similar for Asian American soldiers in the military. And this is why the community needs to educate, because that's where we have power. We learned that Congress is not where we can go to get relief, because Congresswoman Velazquez, Nydia Velazquez, Danny's representative, she initially introduced a bill that would require automatic transfers if hazing was occurring for the individual being hazed, anonymous reporting, and a bunch of other things. But through committee negotiations, that strong bill got watered down, and what was passed was simply a reporting requirement. And so we learned through that experience that we have to think outside the box and how we are going to take control of what we have in our control, and our control is education. That if the system isn't going to change, if they're not going to meaningfully enforce anti-hazing provisions, then it is our duty, our responsibility to educate our community that this is happening, because they are not telling recruits that this is happening. Danny did not know what he was getting into. Had he known, I think he would have thought differently. Very, very important that we educate, and that's the power, that's the control that we have.
I think we have time for a couple of more. There was, in the middle, the hand's been up. If we can get a microphone there.
Sorry, Liz, thank you so much for that. But the one system that I'm actually thinking about was not military, but law enforcement. There was a case with a gentleman that was calling out corruption within one of the precincts in Queens. And then now he's actually sort of going through his own version of hazing, per se. Completely different system, and I don't want to take too much time. But it feels like he's going through a similar type of thing, where he's actually been sent to Rikers for misdemeanors. He basically was charged for 2 misdemeanors, and he got sent to Rikers last Tuesday. So, you know, it doesn't feel right, and it feels like there's more going on. But if there's an opportunity to talk about that offline, it would be appreciated. Sorry.
So you had said earlier that Josephine might have been based on like Danny in terms of like the translation. And I guess Danny and anyone else who knows like the answer to this question, you know, obviously like there wasn't just a mother around, right? There was a father. Josephine, I'm sure, is a conglomeration of so many other people in the community that knew Danny. And I'm not interested, as someone who also is related to someone who's been killed, like I'm not interested at all in like, you know, exploitation of the family, but I just want to know like who was the community around Danny that loved him, that you weren't able to include in this opera. And I just hope that they're doing okay right now. And thank you, Danny, as well for representing your family, because I know how hard that is to have to be the spokesperson for your family, and I wonder how that has been for you to be the spokesperson.
In terms of having the character Josephine, I really appreciated that. And I'm happy with the creative liberty that was taken with that. Less of me shown, I'm happy with that as well. And then
I did a story profiling him 2 years ago. He didn't even watch it yet. That's how much he doesn't want to be part of this situation. I'm getting to rap, but let me do this. I don't want to be biased against the upper level. You have a question up there? Okay, let's end on a high note, get it? I can't? I know. I can't send a mic up there. You can probably yell it out. One of you guys
I have a teacher's voice.
There we go.
So this question is more for Danny because
Just
sorry, I'm not
totally
yelling
hate
at you. But it was also kind of like a question because this must be such a hard time. And what is your experience in like seeing this opera come to fruition? Because so much of this has happened, and like she mentioned, I don't know how it would feel for you to always have to attend to all of these events. And honestly, it's so difficult, right? What is your thoughts on what you would have liked to include in opera, or stories that you think your family could have shared, or what do you think of all of this together?
I think something that's different that we experience in terms of having a definite family is we never really had the time or the opportunity to mourn fully, because it was like not even a week after Danny had passed. All these things started coming out, these revelations of what happened prior to his death. And then it was almost instant, like we have to jump with the help of people like people from the community, people like Liz coming out and saying we have to jump on top of this, we have to find out what actually happened, putting pressure on the US military. And so yeah, we had to turn out for a lot of defense, ask a lot of help, received a lot of help. So that was for the past couple of years after Danny's death. So I feel like we had a long-term of slow mourn instead of, and all these constant reminders of passing of a close family member, and along with the horrible details along with it. And in a way, it's 12 years now, we're still mourning. It's still tough to get over that Danny had passed, and the thing is, in a way, we don't want to get over it because there's still a lot of work to be done. We always say we don't want this to happen to anyone else, because we understand the pain of what it's like.
And I could just say, when Danny died, Danny was a freshman in college. This happened literally in October, 1 month after he started college. And he had to step up to be the spokesperson for the family. And I've just watched him grow and blossom. And I think this tragedy has challenged all of us to dig deep and find strength. And in many ways we have. And I just want to end on a high note in the sense that the mother is the pillar of strength. She needed the community to support her when this first happened. But let me tell you, when we were going through these court-martials and the community was devastated, it was her strength that got us through it. So I just want to echo what Danny said. Tuesday, we brought her here because she knows she has to come out, because everybody wants to know, is the family going to come out? Do they support this work? When Danny died at the funeral, she was wailing. You could hear her throughout the funeral home. She was wailing. On Tuesday, 13 years later, she started to weep silently when Mother Chen came on the stage. But those drops and tears were a sign of strength, because the opera brought out emotions and feelings. And if we can't feel and compassion for somebody in a situation like that, then these things will continue to happen. Those who did this to Danny had no feeling. So it's so important that we be able to feel. And so, again, I want to thank all of you for coming and supporting, and we hope you will keep Danny Chen's legacy alive.